All right, today we're going to be teaching a first grade math lesson, which is the addition of decade numbers. And we're going to represent and solve addition problems. Our supplies that we're going to use are going to be dry erase markers, board, math manipulatives, and a projector. The academic content language will be addition and decade numbers. Our objective for this lesson is going to be students will be able to solve equations involving decade numbers by adding with 80% accuracy. That's going to be our goal. For our anticipatory set, the students will be given different objects in groups of 10. The students will be asked how many different ways they can come up with to figure out how many objects that they have. When students have finished coming up with different strategies for finding out the total of their objects, we will compose a list of the different strategies. For the direct instruction and the modeling, I will pose a question to activate students' prior knowledge to review information from our previous lesson. I'll ask questions like, who can tell me what a decade number is? And who can tell me the next step in solving this equation? So we'll review what we learned last lesson on decade numbers, and we will go over the number sequence again. When the students have finished thinking and coming up with the answer, they will share with their shoulder partner. Once they have finished sharing, I will share the definition of decade numbers once again with the class, multiples of 10. Then we will talk about some of the strategies they came up with during the anticipatory set. I will choose several other strategies to show them how to add different decade numbers together. I will model several different examples, having the students help me count and solve the problems on the board. I will ask the students to come up by the teacher, and they will walk the class through a problem. And I will ask who can tell me the next step in solving this equation. The students will be able to see multiple problems with different options for solving the equations. There are many different ways to add, and it's just whichever works. People use fingers. They draw. They use manipulatives like the math cubes as that was used in the earlier lesson. For the guided practice, students will be given math counters and paper to help them show how they will solve different math equations involving decade numbers. I will give students a number of different equations they need to solve, and I'll start with the smaller number equations, and then I'll work my way up to the bigger ones. Once students are given a problem, they will work and show how they solve the problem. They can use manipulatives, draw pictures, whatever they need to do. I'll remind students that they need to be able to explain how they solve the problem. I'll be room roving and checking in on all the students just to make sure that if they need help, that they are receiving the help that they need, and that they are staying on the right track. Now, some of the questions I would ask would be, what is 10 plus 10, 20 plus 20, and then we will jump up to the higher order numbers, and 70 plus 70. Okay, for the independent practice, students will be given a worksheet involving addition problems with decade numbers, and the students will have access to the manipulatives and paper if they need to solve the problems. For the assessment, each student will be required to create and solve 3 addition math problems using decade numbers, and they will turn in their work to be checked. Now, on the assessment, the problems they create cannot be duplicate numbers, so they can't be a 20 plus 20 or a 30 plus 30. They have to be differing numbers. So a 10 plus 30 or a 80 plus 90. Questions that really kind of challenge their learning after the lesson has been taught. So just to show that they have a grasp of the concept that we're teaching. The learning styles are pretty much relatively the same as the decade numbers lesson. For the visual learner, they can see the examples on the board. The auditory learner is listening to the teacher explain the concepts. The tactile kinesthetic learner is working collaboratively in groups and using the manipulatives. For differentiated instruction, for the early finisher, I'll provide a more difficult worksheet, give them higher value decade numbers to add. The struggling student, of course, one-on-one assistance is always going to be preferred with a struggling student. The easily distracted students, I would pair them up with different shoulder partners, someone who they're not really amazing friends with, so they don't get distracted, and then maybe they can the other they can help each other out. An alternate learning activity would be students can go on a scavenger hunt around the room looking for items that have enough to make a decade number. And when they have found items that they can count and find out how many decade numbers that they can make. So say I said, okay guys, go on a scavenger hunt throughout the room. I want you to collect crayons or colored pencils. And then they'd find all their crayons and colored pencils, and then they'd add them together and create decade numbers. I think that'd be a fun and entertaining alternate learning activity. For our learner expression, our students were able to express their knowledge of decade numbers by drawing, counting fingers, using manipulatives, or any other method that works for them in learning this concept. They were able to express their knowledge by explaining their train of thought to the teacher, and students are also able to collaborate with their group mates, which is also, group collaboration is a very good tactic for learning any type of material. Instructional connections. Addition of decade numbers are expanding the students' prior knowledge of numbers and decade numbers. So it takes the decade number lesson and then broadens it and makes it more fulfilling, more full. This also paves the way for students to begin more complex addition problems in the future, so they can eventually add decade numbers in the hundreds and just expand from there. For the theory connection, John Dewey believes that all students learn by doing, and this supports my hands-on approach throughout this lesson. I'm a huge fan of hands-on learning and using manipulatives and just making the lesson fun, because I believe that most students don't enjoy a lecture or just listening to a teacher talk. I think that if there's any form of manipulative or any type of hands-on activity, that is definitely infinitely more beneficial than using or just listening to someone speak. For the closure, at the end of the lesson, I will send all the students off. I'll say, great job today, guys. You did amazing. We learned how to add decade numbers using, whatever we want to use to. There's so many different ways to add them, and they've discovered them, and it's a great job. And now they know what 20 looks like represented, or how what 50 crayons looks like. And these skills are very important, and just tell them again how amazing they did, and then just reflect back on what you learned with the addition. And then I'd even go back a little bit further and say, okay guys, now you know what decade numbers are, you know what the number sequence is, and you know how to add them together. And now next time we're going to learn how to subtract them, which is going to be a little bit tougher, but since everybody did so good on the prior lessons, and it shouldn't be that bad. Anyway, this is all, these lessons are all meant to be an hour in length. There's definitely a lot more time spent in the guided learning and the direct instruction. And this is also, again, a first grade math class. So definitely these activities provided should be more than enough for any first grade class to effectively learn a math concept, because I know math is always quite difficult, and making it fun is definitely the key to learning any concept. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we will speak with you soon.